Most of us are going somewhere we know. That doesn't mean we should know what to expect. Be careful. Look out for each other. This is the fight of our lives. And we're gonna win. Whatever it takes.
Okay, right off now. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies and specifically talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 242. And my guest this week, co-host of the Nostalgiacast, it's Darin. Darin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Travis?
I am doing quite well. So our movie for this week was Avengers Endgame. You had not
The
seen
little
this
known
before. Yeah, little.
No, I had not.
So
made a few bucks at the box office, right?
Yeah, it made a little bit of money at the box office. It's fairly well known. My first question is, how did you not accidentally see it, given that it made $1 billion worldwide? Like,
do you want the short answer or the really, really long answer?
Whichever one you want to give me.
Well, just so people know where I'm coming from. Like everybody, I got addicted to the MCU with Iron Man, and it just spilled out from there. And I've obviously 4 years later, you had Marvel's The Avengers, and that was like seeing them gathered for the first time after those 4 movies or 5 movies before it. You're like, wow, they did it. They really pulled off this project that they did. Like they just combined everything and they really made it work. And so that was impressive. And then when Thanos turns around at the end of the first Avengers, I was like, oh, so this is not just a project, a one-off thing. This is something's going to go and go and go. But it's still fine because I enjoyed Iron Man 3, and obviously Guardians started coming out. Winter Soldier was that. So I enjoyed everything. And I think it just got to the point where I just started recognizing, I don't want to say flaws, but like repetitions and like little shortcomings that befalls every single franchise. MCU is really no different from every other franchise, and that
Sure.
if you're going to keep it going, you need to like ignore certain things or brush past certain things or take your time getting places. And I was getting disillusioned. And then by the time Black Panther hit, I was like, I think this is the high. I think this is the best that they're going to do, because it was a very personal project. Like the costumes and the art direction, just it spoke to the Black community, and I was like, there's a voice here. And so I thought, I don't know if franchise movies are going to get better than this, and I just decided I just wasn't going to watch them anymore. And the problem with that, because again, I decided not to do that because it's like, well, I don't have time to keep watching. I've got so many other things, right?
Sure.
That I have to start picking and choosing. But the thing with being on Twitter is that with spoiler culture and things like that, the hard part was, well, if I'm not going to watch these things, I have to make peace with the fact that things are going to get spoiled. And once you do that, then it's fine. And so, by osmosis, I'd watched Endgame because all the clips and everything. So and again, I wasn't mad at it because I made that deal with myself. But then again, I watched Infinity War just a few months ago. I did watch Spider-Man No Way Home and Black Widow and just a few other things without watching Endgame because I understood everything from the memes and things like that. But it was just a question of I know what to expect now. Nothing's really going to surprise me. I need to catch up on all these other things. Like obviously your show is, Wait, You Haven't Seen, right?
Right.
So I've got a lot of other movies I need to catch up on instead of these things that are just kind of, again, I'm going to sound negative, but they're off an assembly line, right? I mean, that's what they want. They want you to come back and just feel the same thing. So that's the long-winded way of saying that's why I hadn't watched Endgame until just yesterday.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can get that. Like when you look at what Marvel has done with this cinematic universe that they created, and say what you want about the quality of the films, but they started off with, they put all their eggs in kind of the Iron Man basket. In 2008, they made that, and they might have, like Kevin Feige might have had ideas of, well, if this does well, we can continue on and maybe make something out of this, and it would be kind of cool to be able to make multiple movies that do tie into each other. But it all hinged on that first Iron Man movie. If that movie doesn't do well, we don't have an MCU, and it did. And it became, I look almost, it's not a new take, but you look at from Iron Man in 2008 to Avengers Endgame in 2019, so 11 years, And I think that spans 20 something movies over 11 years, which is, if you kind of think about it like it was one season of a television show just stretched out on a ridiculous level, it's
Right.
basically that. It's one long arcing story that the difference is they didn't start with where it was going to end as the plan. They kind of started, realized, oh, we've got something here. And then by the time of 4 or 5 years down the road is when you start hitting that sort of, that's where you get some of the, because my whole thing with the MCU at the end of the day is that even at its worst, it's watchable. And and if it's a type of story that you're going to get into, or if it's characters that you want to watch, then they're great. And if it's not your thing, then you don't have to. Like the Marvels just came out. I just went and saw that over the weekend. And one of the things I was hearing from people was, oh, I don't want to have to do the homework to watch that. And you don't have to. You can get more out of it, but it's like reading the book of the Lord of the Rings and then watching the film and seeing the way that they adapt it. You just, there's more layers to it at that point. But I also understand, like, number one, superhero stories are not for everybody. And there is a bit of a fatigue that can happen. Like I said, that was 20 something movies over the span of 11 years. That's a lot. That is a lot to ask out of somebody to keep up with in the first place. It's really become, as they've gone on and more so past Endgame and past sort of that first kind of overarching story that they told, it's really become like comic books.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Where you've got all these different books going on, and it's like you can't. There's just, it's impossible to keep up with everything. So I think the way that you went about it is actually pretty smart. Like, you enjoyed the first part of that ride, and then you got to a point where it was just like, you know what, I can't. I've got other things I want to do. I want to spread, broaden your horizons a little bit, because you can always come back to something like this later too, if it strikes your fancy. Now, you having watched Infinity War a couple months ago, did that pique your interest at all to like actually absorb all of Endgame, or was it more of like, well, okay, I saw that, it was okay, but it was still just kind of like a back burner thing, like maybe someday I'll get to it?
Well, I think we messaged each other because Infinity War, it's interesting. I don't really think of the Russos as good. I don't know. I don't think of them as really quality filmmakers. They're good. What's the word I'm looking for? They're organizers. They're good at, because they came up on Arrested Development and Happy Endings and Community things. So they're good at wrangling all these different personalities, and that's what I think really sells them. I think with Winter Soldier, they hit on like a tone that was like, oh, this is like fast paced and more than just the '70s conspiracy. It was like, it had that tone. It had Robert Redford in it, obviously, but it also had this like real world feel that I don't know that the previous MC. So that's what hooked me with Winter Soldier. But then Civil War, again, Winter Soldier has this paranoid kind of feel to it because it's after those '70s films. But Civil War, they just did the same style, and for me, it didn't fit the paranoia. Didn't fit that story because that's not the same story. And then with Infinity War, I mean, again, they're good gatherers, but I just think like some of the visuals in Infinity War were like, yeah, you could tell these guys are from TV. But again, that was the point where the MCU started. Instead of great physical costumes, they would just paper over them with CGI, right? Like the Spider-Man suit or the Black Panther suit. So just the visuals, it seemed very processed. But what I really liked about Infinity War was, number one, it made it from the point of view of the bad guy. So he was technically the protagonist of the story, and everybody was trying to stop him, and he accomplishes his goal. I thought that was brave for a story. But again, when you're in franchises and you realize they're killing off half of everybody, and you're like, well, obviously they're not, because they already announced like a Spider-Man movie, so obviously they're not dead, right? And I like to say that I watched it with my wife, Infinity War, with my wife a little, and she watched the whole part where they were dying like in silence. Like, no, like I guess in theaters, like people were just screaming because they didn't. And again, it's brave that they did that. But my wife kind of had the right point. She was, it ended, and then she looked at me very quietly and she said, "So how do they come back?" Because it didn't. It didn't. She knew that they were going to come back. You know what I mean? So that's the problem with the franchise stuff, is where they're going. So some of the impact is lost. But again, I like and there are some other issues I had in Infinity War that I don't know if we necessarily need to go into those, but just as a story, I thought it was good, but it didn't. Yeah, I was like, well,
I still had Captain Marvel to watch,
Hmm.
so I had to do that. And so I was like, well, I'm not super excited to watch that because of the discourse around it. Like I remember, if you liked Captain Marvel when it came out, you were like an SJW, and if you
Oh
hated it,
yeah,
then you were a misogynist. And I was like, well, I can't win then. What's the point of watching this movie if I can't voice an opinion?
and
So I just wasn't excited about doing that. So I
yeah,
never got around to it.
and so much of that is just so exhausting. Like I just get tired of, like, it's okay to like things, it's okay to not like things, but the tribalism of that kind of stuff just wears
Right.
me out. Like you said, you can't win. You're going to piss
Yeah.
somebody off. So um that's interesting though. And there's really no way to talk about Endgame without talking about Infinity War, because it's
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of one big story anyway. But
Right.
I like the way you say that, where Infinity War was, like, to a casual fan, I can see people kind of getting upset with characters dying off. With any amount of media literacy, you sort of know they're coming back. Something's going to happen because the
Right.
story is not done. If nothing else, the story isn't finished yet. And,
Yeah.
but you're right in that it is brave to have your bad guy win and he
Yeah.
accomplishes his goal. And, you know, it's not obviously not the first movie to do that, and it's not the first franchise film to even do that, but it's
Right.
still a brave move to make. Your point on the Russo brothers, I think you're not that far off. Honestly, like, I don't look at, because the way the MCU started, Jon Favreau had kind of a style, and
Yeah.
it fit Iron Man really, really well. And those first few
Right.
MCU movies, when you had Kenneth Branagh directing Thor, you had
Mm-hmm.
Louis Leterrier doing Incredible Hulk, which I feel is better than people give credit for. Is it
Yeah.
perfect?
It's not
No,
like you
but it's
said. It's not bad. I haven't seen Thor: Love and Thunder yet, so I don't know. I haven't hated an MCU movie yet. They're all very watchable, just like you said. Incredible Hulk is very watchable. I don't have. At the end of the day, like I know I've got kind of the reputation of being the MCU hater on Twitter, but I'm not. It's just once I've seen a great movie that they've
Mhm.
done, I know that they can be capable of so much more. Incredible Hulk, it's fine and it's a good 2 hour
Sure.
watch. Sorry to interrupt you, but
No, no,
yeah,
no, you're
there's
fine.
nothing wrong with
On Thor: Love and Thunder, if you liked Ragnarok and you go into it with the mindset of, like, this is just Ragnarok 2, it's not bad. It
Okay.
is still just Taika Waititi in the end of the day. Like,
Yeah. Okay.
it got a lot of
Right.
hate, but I watched it and I thought, oh, the difference for me between Ragnarok and Love and Thunder was just, well, Ragnarok was new and it was different,
Yeah.
and we hadn't
Right.
seen that in the MCU yet, and then we're just
Right.
kind of retreading it.
Mhm.
Which is, to your point, it's, and what I think with the Russos is they came up in TV, and you're right, they are great organizers, they're great wranglers, but also
Yeah.
they kind of get that feel of like the studio director, right? The director that's
Right.
like, um, they get called on. One that I can think of is Peter Hyams, is
Mhm.
one of those kind of guys where he was somebody that you could pull in, even sometimes last minute as a replacement for a director would drop, and the studios knew what they were getting out of him. He was just an old school movie guy,
Yeah.
and that's where, because he directed one of my favorite movies in Running Scared. I absolutely adore
Yeah.
that
That's a great
movie.
one. Yeah. Mhm.
But he also did stuff like The Relic and End of
Right.
Days. Like,
Right.
they're fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with them, but there's nothing great about them either. He's a gun for hire, kind of. And that's sort of
Yeah.
what the Russos kind of feel like, right? That's that they're
Yeah.
not they're not auteurs. They're not the Coen brothers.
Right.
They're not, a
Well, you
director with,
talk
like,
about.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you're fine.
Uh,
You talk about like studio directors like Michael Curtiz of all people, like directing Casablanca and Adventures of Robin Hood. He was a guy that directed movies like crazy, right?
mhm.
I mean, Casablanca, like very well known as one of the greatest, if not the greatest movies ever made, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have anything wrong with studio
Oh
directors.
yeah,
It's
neither do
just
I.
like when you're given the choice, it's like when you have a Ryan Coogler, when you have a James Gunn, you
Mhm.
have Taika Waititi, which I really look and Shane Black, like I look for those personality. Once you start like the franchise, like we talked about, it's just a conveyor belt type thing,
Mhm.
right? So once they start doing that, like I start savoring the Shane Blacks and the
Yeah.
James Gunns and the Ryan, because those are, this is a director not just doing studio stuff, even though sometimes like Coogler was, he's forced to do studio stuff with the Final Battle or the CGI Black Panther, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
still, there's a voice that I can hear. And again, I don't think the Russos have like any voice. I know that they think they do, but
Mhm.
it's just they're fine. There's nothing like terrible about them, but it's like, I appreciate something more with a little more style. Again, that sounds negative, but there's nothing wrong. Just back to your point, there's nothing wrong with studio directors.
No, and I think too, honestly, with something like the Infinity War Endgame type of movie, while a little bit more of a voice would be great, at the same time, it's this mishmash of all these different characters coming from
Right.
movies with different styles kind of coming together. So
Yep.
in that sense, I think the Russos did a pretty damn good job given what they had in that. Like that's kind of
Right.
that impossible task of, well, you've got to take Iron Man out of the John Favreau / Shane Black movies, right? Which, by the way, Iron Man 3 super underrated in the MCU. Shane Black,
Yeah, one of
I
my favorites. Yeah.
I really liked that movie, and I'm
Right.
I'm in the minority of liking the Trevor Slattery reveal because I just thought that's a great trope
Yeah. Well,
subversion. Like
it
all the
is.
marketing
If it
points you in
helps you,
one
I'm with
direction.
you.
Good,
Yeah.
because like it's that the all the marketing gets you looking right, and then they come into from the left with like, aha, check this out, and I
Right.
liked that. But when you're pulling that character out of this and this character out of that, you sort of need I don't know if needs the right word, but I don't mind the less of a distinct voice here because all the characters still get what they need
Yeah.
in it. And that was one of the
Yeah.
things that I thought with Endgame was really interesting was our three, they focused so much on kind of the three main heroes. They focused so much on Iron Man, on Thor, and on Captain America.
Yeah.
While also the kind of the core Avengers, right? And then Clint, Hawkeye and Black Widow. And I loved sort of the three different stories being told.
Yeah.
Because we start off with everybody, they've lost. They're regrouping. They're licking their wounds. Tony's floating out in space. He comes home and they bring him home. And there's like the internal conflict, right? Of we lost and you weren't there and all that kind of stuff. And then, oh, we've got a chance to go fix it. And they get to Thanos and nope, it's too late. He's already like done away with the one thing they could have used to fix it. And so you get Thor's kind of rock bottom moment of, and then the story they told with Thor, I thought was really, I loved that. A good deal of that is Chris Hemsworth's Thor is this just kind of buffoon, but he's so lovable. And
well,
then
that's what made him such a great likable, because he was very thou and this, that, and with Branagh's, which is fine because that's how you establish it. But I think by the time Ragnarok came around, I mean, they established him as kind of a goofball, but that's what people liked. They settled on a format that people like really enjoyed. And I get that the comic book fans push against that, but it's like, but Hemsworth is a really gifted comedian and he really sells his stuff, and I like his Thor. So you have that argument of comics versus movies, but I think that once you settle into something that works, you want to stick to it instead of tripping back yourself.
And they're two different mediums too, so it's not the same character. It's a interpretation of that character from the comics. As long as you don't make them completely different. Like, while I love an example of changing a character a ton is the first Mission Impossible movie, turning Jim Phelps into the bad guy. Like, that's totally 180 degrees from who he was in the show, but I also sort of got it. Like, didn't bother me at the time. But as long as you're not just fundamentally rewriting a character and their motivations, if you change a little bit about them here, like Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark isn't a picture perfect Tony Stark from the comics, but he is a great adaptation of who Tony Stark is. And if there's one thing that Marvel has done great from the beginning is casting. Their casting for these characters knocks it out of the park every single time. I can rarely think of somebody who's miscast. There might be some actors that get misused or underutilized.
Right.
But it's rare. And usually those are villains. That's been their one big thing is a lot of villains just aren't that well fleshed out. So the few that do stand out. But their casting
unless you're
is
talking about
so
like in Edward Norton or a Terrence Howard, where I don't know if they were miscast, but it's like they recast him, right? I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It's just stuff that, that's studio stuff.
Yeah, and that's all, kind of behind the scenes stuff. I mean, Norton is a fantastic actor, and I liked him as Banner. I do like Ruffalo better
Right.
because I think he fits the tone that they're going for. But that was just a case of like Norton and the studio not getting along. So that
Right.
happens. That's nothing new.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, when you think about the number of movies that they've done and shows and all that kind of stuff, to have as few recastings as they've had for these characters that have been around forever, is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Endgame did, so you had your first story, and then you have your middle story, which is the time heist, which is probably the most fun of this movie because it's just ridiculous. It's so silly and it's such a
Right.
dumb concept, but I love it at the same time because of the ridiculous nature of it. Plus, we got a lot of Scott Lang, and I mean, just give me all the Paul Rudd you can. Like, I'm fine with that. And then you had that third act where they accomplished their goal, but then now we've got the big fight, and that is obviously it's a huge CG spectacle. But where a lot of superhero movies can end that way, this is one of those that earns that big CG set piece at the end of it, because you don't want to have that battle take place, because there's going to be a battle, without giving everybody enough time, right? Everybody's got to get some time on screen. And it did have, I will say, in the theater, there's been a few moments in theaters for me that I can recall how I felt at that very moment, like the visceral feeling that I got in the theater. And one of those was in Avengers Endgame, and it's Cap pulling Mjolnir and holding it for the first time because I'd read it, it was in the comics that he was able to do that, and it was not signposted really much at all. So that moment when it happened was just, I mean, I've been in some theaters with cheering going on. I don't understand it totally, but I get it in some ways. But that was one of the louder ones I can remember. And just that moment of that happening, which, that's 10 years of film kind of culminating into almost a single moment. But I just really enjoyed what they did to kind of put the bow on it. Now, that's where I think it's one of the strengths of Endgame, but also it hurts as a franchise. And I don't even think it hurts as a franchise. It denotes, it's a demarcation point, is Endgame puts a nice bow on so many stories.
Right.
Because it lets you wrap up Captain America's story and move on to the next one. And it wraps up Tony's story and move on to the next. The only thing is, I do wish there was a little bit more for Black Widow in terms of fallout from what happened to her.
Right.
Because she was so integral to that team. And so as a character, the moment that it happens, that whole thing with her and Clint on Vormir, I still have a little bit of trouble watching that, to be honest, because I get a little emotional when I watch certain movies, and this is one of them. It's that moment where, and I think it's because the relationship between those two characters is such a relationship we don't get enough in movies between, a man and a woman, especially. But it's a pure love between Natasha and Clint that has no romantic undertones to it whatsoever. And it's not familial by blood, but they understand each other so well. And there's just such a tight bond there. And I think the two of them pull that off so well. So it's just one of those moments that really sticks with me, of the struggle, especially as Clint is like, well, I know what I've got to do. And that's like, yeah, I know it needs to be done. He's like, I think we're thinking of two different things here. It's just that realization washing over his face is so good. And I like Jeremy Renner a lot, and Scarlett Johansson too. I mean, so many actors in this are just fantastic. But
well, the thing with, you're talking about that, it's built over 22 films, right? I mean, it was there in the first Avengers, and how, what is it, Loki that questions her, is this love? And he's like, that I'm not a child, you know what I mean? And it goes much deeper than even best friends. I mean, they're just, and even Laura, Clint's wife, understands that, and
Mm-hmm.
Natasha's an integral part of their lives. So there is that. Again, it's those character bonds. I know that Civil War came out the same year as Batman v Superman, and the
Mm-hmm.
problem with Batman v Superman is they had to establish all these character arcs, so it was hard. But in Civil War, where they, because of the Accords or whatever, and they split, the characters have been built to the point where we know exactly how they're going to side, right?
Yep.
And it's not, we don't have to struggle with it or try to figure out why, like we did with the other movie, because we've been attuned to these characters and what they feel. And I think, yeah, I'm down. Like I said, I'm down on the MCU with its flaws and things like that, and with its shortcomings. But there's no denying the power. You talked about, with this is a culmination. Endgame is a culmination of those 10, 11 years, and
Mm-hmm.
it brings that to a close so well. I can't be the cynic and watch this and go, they didn't do a good job at it, because those, the crowd pleasing moments hit, and they hit hard, and that's the thing. There's a difference, and I've seen the reaction videos when Cap picks up Mjolnir, and just the way the audience goes crazy. There's a difference between that and a difference between watching it at home with my family and the kids running around yelling and the wife not really interested,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't hit the same way. But again, I'd also been, because I'd seen the reaction videos and the memes,
Mm-hmm.
that impact was lessened. So if anything, yeah, I made the decision not to watch these, but I do regret not being part of that communal experience to experience these things.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, for me, another instance of that in a theater was, and I got real into in 2004, Firefly. It was my
Hmm.
I got exposed to it. A friend of mine had the DVD set, and I was
Where you
only
got to
semi.
watch them in order,
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have to deal with Fox messing that up. No, in fact,
right?
he loaned me the set. There's 14 episodes of the show. I watched them all in a 24-hour period the first time. I couldn't stop. I was just voracious.
Yeah,
But it was a show that was very important to me and my friends at the time. So when Serenity came out the next year, and I went and saw that in the theater, I had a very similar type of moment with that movie in a specific scene involving Wash, where I'd never felt the air get
oh
sucked out of a room like
yeah,
that. The collective gasp like almost made my ear pop from a pressure change. And
right.
that was it. So it sounds like you had a similar experience, or can go with that. So it was that level of thing with Endgame in a theater. And so it is a bummer you didn't
Yeah,
get to experience that, but there are films that do that for us. And
right.
I think maybe had it not been an 11-year journey to get to Endgame,
Hmm.
because the MCU. So the whole Martin Scorsese thing of, like, Marvel films aren't cinema; they're theme park rides, and however you want to interpret that, or whatever the exact quote was, like, he's not wrong about that either
No,
at all. And the MCU doesn't need to be cinema, doesn't need to be high
no,
art to be good and
no.
to be enjoyable. But an 11-year roller coaster ride, that's a long time to stay in the car. So, like, people that tap out at some point, I get it.
Mhm.
But
And they got you there. They got you there in the car. That's
yeah,
what's impressive.
hmm it is,
You got
because
there safe and you enjoyed the ride.
on paper it shouldn't work. Like, we talk about franchises, but think about pre Iron Man franchises that were out there. Uh, I mean, outside of something like a horror franchise like Friday the 13th, you didn't have a lot that did multiple movies over the course of 10 years. You might get 2 or 3 Ninja Turtles movies, or you might get a movie and a sequel. James Bond had been going for a long time by that point, but it wasn't a commonplace thing. And it certainly wasn't
Right.
with disparate characters telling all sorts of stories that culminated together. That wasn't a thing done in movies a whole lot. Like, you didn't see that. Um, it would always be like horror franchises basically were whoever the killer was, and then insert your cannon fodder for that particular movie.
Right.
So Marvel really did something interesting with this. And to your point, when you talked about Batman v Superman, its problem was trying to do 5 years worth of what Marvel did in one movie.
Right.
And you
Because they
just
were
can't.
playing catch up.
Yeah, you just can't
No, you
do
can't.
that. And Hollywood being a copycat area, like, when something works, people follow it. You look at Lord of the Rings is shot basically back to back, which I'm trying to think of another series of movies or sequels that did that. The only ones I could think of, maybe Back to the Future before that,
Yeah.
where they were
Well,
like,
Pirates of the Caribbean did it, and
yeah, but
Spider-Verse is doing it now, I think.
yeah, but all of that came at like Lord of the
Not all
Rings.
three. Yeah.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings really kind of set that um, tone for doing that.
Yeah.
And it's like the MCU kind of set this idea of, oh, you can do interconnected movies and not just like an Easter egg here or there, but actually like characters that will cross over. And
Mhm.
I have to give them a ton of credit for that. It's not an easy thing to do. And we are seeing, I do feel like there's a little bit of a loss from the beginning. Like the start of the MCU, what was kind of cool about it was you would get like a period movie, like Captain America: First Avenger, right? It's a World War II set action movie, and you'd get your the first Ant-Man's a heist movie, and you're right in that they've gotten a little too homogenized with some of the things that they've been doing. I still enjoy stuff. It's not my favorite, but like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I sat down and watched it, and I had a good time, but I didn't have high expectations for this to be something mind-blowingly new. Now, had it been, I would have been pleasantly surprised, but it's sort of, you're right in that you kind of know what you're getting at this point. And, take that what you will. For some people, that's what they want. They don't, because that's another thing too, that I have to consider when I think about talking about movies like this is I know people that don't want a film to challenge them. They just want to have popcorn entertainment all the time.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong at all. In fact, we're better off having both. I want both ends of that spectrum. What I don't want is for it to tip too far to where the thing that I worry about is the only movies getting made or stuff like that. Thankfully, we're not. I can't say that we're really in danger of that happening, but it's always a fear that you have, right? Because box office drives so much, and so many people put a lot of stock into box office wrongfully, I think, because box office numbers are not equal to quality of a film at all. I think you even I think you tweeted something like that today.
Yep. Yeah, I did.
It's like the Marvels is a prime example. I went and saw the Marvels. I had a great time with it. It's a nice, hour 45 minutes, so it's not overly bloated. It wasn't a groundbreaking story by any stretch, but it was a fun movie. And honestly, Ms. Marvel, Iman Vellani, I think is her name.
Oh, yeah.
She's a treasure. She is just amazing.
Joy. Yeah.
So, but that movie is supposedly doing terrible numbers, and it's a bummer that the movie doesn't make enough money for the studio to want to do something with that. But at the same time, it's not what the quality of the film is. It's a good movie.
So the thing that I'm noticing now, again, like commenting just on a couple of things, like Scorsese, yeah, there's a little bit of the old man yelling at clouds, but what he is absolutely saying is what you just said. It's like, I enjoy these. It's good to have both, but if it's just the one thing, that's where it's boring. I need to be challenged, but then I also just need 2 hours of just fun where I can just erase all the problems of the day. It needs to be that nice balance. If all it is, and again, I get in trouble because I compare the MCU to McDonald's. Maybe I'll compare it to my favorite place to eat is In-N-Out, right?
Okay.
Let's compare it to that. It's like I can eat it In-N-Out like whenever I want. But if I'm eating there for 3 weeks straight, I'm going to be like, I need something else. It's nothing against In-N-Out. I just need a different meal in my stomach, right?
Absolutely.
And that's at the heart of what Scorsese's saying. And I know people, because they don't, the funny thing about comic book movies and comic book movie nerds is that they spent so much of their lives, I say this all the time, like being bullied by people that didn't like these things. And now that comic book movies are the norm, now they become the bullies, and they're pushing back on people that don't like them, like Scorsese or like some other critics who, because they're, how dare you insult the thing that I love, and I've got the power now, right? And so that's, again, I don't mind that. I just need some more stuff. And that's why, again, when I hit Black Panther, I was like, this is like the high point of I get a voice, but I also get the entertainment. And this is
Yep.
like a great melding of the two, right? And the other thing you talking about Serenity is like I'd never watched Firefly. I still haven't, as a matter of fact, but it's still on my list. But the thing that made Serenity so great is that the writing and the character work in that is so great that when Wash, what happens when that happens, or the big twist when what are the I can't remember the zombie creatures' names.
Reavers.
What were they called? When you find out what the Reavers are,
Yeah.
the way that the writing is done, I was like, oh, this is a big thing. Like
Hmm.
I haven't seen the series, but I get that this is, and that's the quality of the writing. And because they sell you, the writing is so good in those things. And that was the thing that was great about Infinity War is I hadn't watched these in a while.
Hmm.
Sitting down to watch Infinity War and remember, and an Endgame as well, the character interactions were just, again, I got to the point where I didn't care what the plots were. Spoil anything. What really matters to me in the MCU is the character interaction because they're so
Yes.
priceless and they've got the characters. They know the characters so well that they can just sit them in a room and they'll be able to bounce off each other in entertaining, fun ways because they enjoy each other's company, right?
Yeah.
And so it was refreshing to sit with Infinity War. Oh yeah, this is why I like this stuff because all the characters stuff. And then you introduce the Guardians with Tony Stark, and there's that dynamic. So there's
Oh
still
yeah.
new stuff. So again, the character stuff just works like gangbusters. And in Endgame, again, I remember the part where Banner is trying. He thinks he's got the time thing, and he's sending Scott back and forth,
Oh
and he
god,
comes
that's so
back
good.
as an old man. When he comes back as a baby, I was just the. It was just so pitch perfect and so funny, and the way that Chris Evans reacted to Ruffalo, and he goes time travel. It was just I was like, this is like
Yep.
this is not something that you can just fake. This is something that's just it works because they've spent so much time with and they know these characters in and out.
Yep.
And because it's that journey, I can't like I could nitpick stuff in Endgame, but at the end of the day, it hits those crowd pleasing moments. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like I have a friend on Twitter, MC Myers, who wrote a great piece on Endgame, and one of his two major complaints were that in Infinity War, you build this whole idea of they lose, right? It's this big thing where they're the heroes, they can't lose, right? But then gradually, like Vision dies and all this stuff happens. And you're like, what's happening? And at the end, when they disappear, again, it's predictable and you can brush it off because they'll come back, but it's really well done. And you
Hmm.
can sense everybody's loss because of the character building. And his issue, MC's issue, was that you build this and then it's all about just undoing that feeling. And the bit in the beginning of Endgame I thought was refreshing because these are the characters and they're dealing with the fallout. You know, when Tony's
Yes.
arguing with Steve, it's like all these frustrations are coming out, and I really like that. But it got to the point where they were like, you know, oh, I don't have to. We can erase all this, so we don't have to deal with our issues. We can go back and get everything back, which again is what you want in a crowd pleasing movie. I can't hold it against that, right? MC also says when Captain America picks up the hammer, you know, I'm kind of confused. I'm like, well, what makes you worthy, right? Because
Hmm.
you know, Thor's obviously like, but he's you know he's only able to pick up the hammer, you know, once he's humbled again, right?
Yep.
And then I don't understand like because Steve picks it up, but then you have with Civil War. One of my problems with it is that I didn't these characters that they built so much. I didn't like Steve in that one. I didn't like Tony in that one because they were acting like very hypocritically and stubborn and all this. So I'm like, well, how does that? You can be stubborn and you can be a jerk to each other, but you're still worth. And I don't know. There's all these things that you can think about. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? But when he lifts that hammer, I can't complain because this it's been building to that, and it's just such a crowd pleasingly great moment that
Hmm.
how do you criticize something like that at the end of the day? You can
Yeah.
asterisk it, but you can't hate on it.
And even like I remember one of the big criticisms of Endgame when it came out, and it's from the minority that didn't like Captain Marvel and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, was there's the shot where Peter Parker's got the gauntlet, and then Captain Marvel shows up and
Yeah,
does her thing with the ship, and then says, "Hey, Peter Parker, you got something for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, but you know, they're looking across the battlefield, and it's just bedlam." He's like, "I don't know how you're going to
yeah,
make it." And there's the whole she's got help, and it's the shot of all
yep,
the women, which I
mhm.
loved because it's all
Yeah,
these
it's great. What's wrong with
characters
it?
coming together at that one moment, and it got so much backlash online unfairly. It's like We had
Yeah.
another moment like that not that long ago with all the dudes, and no one cared about that one. Like no one made a big deal about that. It's
Yeah.
it, there's nothing wrong. Like I love those little pockets of moments. You mentioned the time travel one. That one kills me every single time I watch this. Or just, I mean, Scott Lang in general, because like Scott Lang gets to be that character that's just like, I'm just happy to be here and I'm a fan of all these
Yeah.
people. Um,
Mhm.
so it's super fun. But like when they go back to New York and you get to see Tony looking in on the Avengers, as they're confronting Loki, and
Yeah.
so it's a scene that we all watched in that movie, and now we're seeing it from the backside of it. But like his reaction to stuff is just great, and like I love all that kind of stuff. It's
It's
just
effortless.
it is, and it's those character moments. You nailed it with saying like the character interactions are what drive this, and it's the casting and then them getting to just live inside those characters and become those characters. Because there was another criticism I've heard. I know Tarantino said this, and I think even Anthony Mackie backed it up. Is like losing the idea of movie stars because
Oh yeah.
they're
Yep. Exactly.
they're only the characters. Um, at first, when I heard that, my initial reaction to it was like, bull. You're not, no, that doesn't happen. And then I get thinking about it. No, no, no. They're talking in the broader sense of like general
Mhm.
audiences are only going to think of
Yep.
Chris Evans as Captain America. And that's unfortunate because the dude's got some range and he's been good in other things. Um,
Yeah.
and I had to realize that the reason I bristled so much at that is that I don't I don't even think of my old excuse with Tom Cruise was like he was always playing the same character. And then I saw him in
Mhm.
something and he wasn't that character anymore. And I'm like, okay, no, he can actually act. But a lot of his
Mhm.
big movies, he's playing the same thing. Um, but like I'm able to sort of separate and let an actor show up in something else and be like, well, no, hold on. Let's see what he's got. Let's see what she's got. Let's let this play out a little bit first instead of immediately saying like, well, there's no way I can watch Keanu Reeves in this movie because I'll only see him as Ted. Um,
Mhm.
and then obviously, you watch John Wick and you're like, yeah, that ain't Ted. Although that's Ted if he went off to military school. That's my
Exactly.
headcanon there. If his dad
John
had actually
Constantine is dead if he was a demon, a demon fighter, an exorcist.
see, okay,
Yeah,
so
it's the same.
there's a great example of a movie that if you want to be a diehard like adaptation should be the same thing as the source material, Constantine
Oh
isn't
yeah,
very
I know you're
good,
going. Right,
right?
right.
Because it deviates quite a bit, but that movie is a lot of fun and
It's
I
great.
I love so
Yeah.
many parts of it. I don't even mind that it is initially I remember initially being like, I don't know if I love this. And then the more I've thought about it over the years, the more I'm like, no, this is great. And it's so
Yeah.
different from what the
Well,
comic was.
yeah, it depends on how you're attacking it because when we watched Constantine in the theater, we watched it for Keanu Reeves, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't know like he was a blonde British dude. So when I
True.
went home and was like, "Well, who's John Constantine?" I was like, "Oh, he's a blonde British dude." I'm like, "Well, what does that have to do with why should that affect?" I enjoyed it. Like
Mhm.
I think personally, I think that might be my favorite Keanu performance because his kind of offhand, kind of stoic, the way that he delivers all his lines and he's a cynic and he's just kind of just done with everything. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think that suits him perfectly. So at the end of the day, I was like, well, I don't care that he's not a blonde British dude. I really loved him in that performance.
Oh,
And
sure.
it's a clever offhand kind of comic book movie. I thought it was, it's not the most perfect thing, but again, I just watched it the third time on Netflix. It was just on. I was like, well, let's see if, and I watched the whole thing because it's very entertaining. But yeah, if you get stuck on those things, like the flames on Optimus Prime or James Bond not blonde. It's that I can't latch myself onto those things because that's not what a character's about. If
No.
or even the Christian Bale voice in Batman. Yeah, it's silly, but that's not that's not what the character it doesn't come down to his voice. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and
There's
I always
all these other
I
things that are happening.
yeah, I always bristled at that one because every actor that played Batman did a Batman voice. Just Bale went
Yeah.
so far over the top with his. Like even going like Kevin Conroy is my favorite interpretation of Batman because I grew up on Batman the animated series.
Yeah. The
And
Batman, right.
and so for me, when I think of Batman, the voice I hear in my head is Kevin Conroy. But he did two different voices for Bruce and Batman.
Yeah.
Like they all do it.
Yeah. And it wasn't
So
distracting. Yeah.
yeah. I will say that I don't care so much about the flames on Optimus Prime, but Optimus Prime having lips was really weird at first, and I had trouble with that.
Well, him in the later movies starting to kill humans and everybody. That's
Yeah, that's a
that's where
little
I
more.
started pushing back. I was like, I
Yeah,
don't. This is not.
but
Michael
you're right.
Bay's
Like
got issues.
yeah, but you're right. That isn't what makes the character. What makes the character is what serves the story being told. And
Yeah.
and there can be many interpretations of that, whether it's John Constantine as Keanu Reeves for that story, for that world. I eventually what I can look at is it's an adaptation. You're taking a source
Yeah.
material, you're adapting it, you're changing some things, and sometimes those work, sometimes those don't. But I think more often than not, let a thing be what it is rather than what you want it to be. Don't try to
Yeah.
like and it's hard, right? It's hard to do because we always bring our baggage and our expectations into whatever we watch. My prime example of that is when Event Horizon came out, 1997, and I went and saw that in the theater at 15, 16 years old. Probably too young to watch it, but whatever.
A little bit.
But it was a group of friends of mine, and we went and saw it. We had all the marketing had set us up for it to be this like sci-fi with a little bit of horror in it, so we weren't prepared for what we saw, and so the initial reaction was that was terrible. We hated it, and
Yeah.
when I sat with it and I revisited it a couple years later, because a friend of mine's like, "No, you give it another chance. You got to watch it again. It's really good." And I watched it a second time, having a better idea of what it was, and not bringing that baggage with me. I was like, "Oh, this is really good. This is a good haunted house story."
Yeah.
And so it's funny how different you can be when you watch stuff. Like my big thing lately, I've been in a big kick of stuff like David Lynch and
Mhm.
really weird, just going out there and watching the weird stuff and letting it kind of just wash over me and take it in. And I needed to be who I am now in order to appreciate something like Blue Velvet or Eraserhead, where if I had watched that when I was 20, 22, I wouldn't have gotten it, and it wouldn't have been enjoyable to me. And
Yeah.
so because I would have been too busy trying to fit it into what I thought it should be. I did that the first time with when I watched Brick. Brick was one of those too
Okay.
that I did that with, where it
Rian
didn't
Johnson
land for
movie.
me. Yeah, the Ryan Johnson one.
Yeah.
It didn't land with me that first time because I had some sort of preconceived notion of what I thought it should be, instead of letting it be the movie that it is. And that is something
Right.
that I wish more people could do, is just let a movie be what it is and then
Well,
judge
yeah, I mean, not to toot my own horn here, but I do have that as my pinned tweet. It's like,
Oh, really?
the problem with criticism is that we often judge a movie for what we want it to do versus what it's trying to do. Like, I think you have to meet a movie on its own terms instead of you expecting it to meet you where you need it to go. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like if I watch a comedy movie, I don't care really if it makes me laugh. It's done its job, right? If a comedy doesn't make me laugh, then it's like, oh, you've failed miserably, right? If a horror movie doesn't scare me, if an action movie doesn't get my pulse racing a little bit, that's the base reaction you should be having to this. And if you're against like adaptations, you always have your original thing. You don't have to have this thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I do not like Batman versus Superman, right? But I can spend my life complaining about that, or I can go, you know what? I have my Dark Knight trilogy, right?
Right.
I
Right.
have my Batman the animated series. I can focus my energy and my attention onto things that I like versus making my whole personality about hate. And because that's the thing with these comic book adaptations, is you've got so many things to pick and choose from that you just, if you don't like something, you've got something to fall back on. You can watch
Yeah.
something else, right? And I think that might be one of there's many issues why the Marvels isn't doing too great, why Quantumania didn't do too great, you know what I mean? But one of the things is, like, if you've got constant TV shows, if you've got constant films, and like we said, when you've got a franchise going, you have to keep like A to B to C storytelling.
Yeah.
That's worked for you many times before. And you have an Iron Man 2, which I like, right? You have like a Ant-Man and the Wasp, that kind of stuff, where they come in and they're not quite up to the, oh, look how powerful this is as Infinity War, main Avengers, that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
you have to you can ignore those because there's you have other things to fall back on, but plus there's not like you don't have 3-4 Marvel shows that you try to watch and oh my gosh, they're following the same format and they're hitting the same flaws that I had with the last one, the problems that I
Mhm.
had with the last one, right?
Yeah.
So when you're so saturated, it's like why, and I think that was the same thing why I stopped watching these movies. It's just I reached a point where I was like, I need to be doing something else. And
Mhm.
Captain Marvel, which is again an enjoyable film, I was kind of upset by it because I was like, I didn't. This is 2 hours that I didn't need to spend. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? You could have said Captain Marvel's the most powerful Avenger without showing me a 2 hour movie, and it accomplishes the same thing, right?
Sure.
So just for me, that movie didn't really do. You know, it was just 2 hours of filler, which is why I stopped watching these movies. But you know, it's just like you said, when you're sitting down to watch these things, you know, you have to meet it on its own terms, right?
Yeah.
I get into arguments all the time with people, and it's, you know, like what you like, but if I look at Infinity War, like I really like Thor Ragnarok because at the end of the movie, when Thor loses his eye, that's mythology. You know,
Mhm.
Odin, when he loses his eye, he gains sight because of that, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, this isn't just the illusion of change that Stan Lee talks about in his comic books, where you can change things but then you switch it back. Like Thor lost an eye, right? Iron Man 3 at the end, he gives up his powers and he gets the chest piece taken out of him,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
These are choices that they're making that you can't walk back. And then they walked it back with Infinity War. I was like, well, I don't know if that's how eyes work. First of all, you just can't plug somebody else's eye. But then it was like, and then he over the course of Ragnarok, he learns I don't need my hammer to be who I am. The power's inside me. It's not my hammer that defines me, right?
Yeah.
But then in Infinity War, he creates a new hammer. So to me watching Infinity War, I'm like, you just walked back something that I thought was so important and I valued so much in Thor Ragnarok. And I say that on Twitter, and people are like, oh, but they have to do that because he can't wear the eye patch, or he has to have the hammer or the axe or whatever, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I get that, but me being told a story.
Mhm.
And they did it with Iron Man 3. The next time we saw Tony in Civil War, he's like, "Oh, remember that whole movie that I spent, you know, realizing I had to give up my suits? Guess what? I couldn't do it, and I lost Pepper." I was like, "So that you've erased it from history. There's no reason that movie needs to exist because the whole arc is erased, right?"
Yeah.
And it's just when in Infinity War, it's the same thing with Spider-Man Homecoming. He goes through the whole movie realizing I don't have to be an Avenger. And then like because one of his first scenes, he becomes an Avenger. You know what I mean? They're erasing all these things that, and Black Panther was I'm sorry, I'm getting to a point here, but Black
No,
Panther,
you're fine.
a scene in a movie, yeah, there's a whole thing with the fight, right? But then it kind of brings it back down to like, let me die like the people on the ships, you know, like a Killmonger says, which is such a powerful line,
Mhm.
right? And I remember sitting in the theater when T'Challa goes back to Harlem. I think that's where it was, where the whole story began with his father and his
Oh,
uncle. When he goes
Compton, yeah.
back, Compton, when they go back to that and they're like, we're starting from ground up from where this whole problem started. I was like, why is amazing for a franchise film. This is so powerful as storytelling and as character work, where you're talking about building back up where things crumbled. And then they introduce, well, Wakanda, we're going to introduce, because the whole point of the movie is they're hiding their technology from the world,
Yep.
and that's making it worse. And so they give their technology, and then in Infinity War they show up, and that whole ending for Black Panther is just about so they can have a place to fight. And again, I get it,
Yeah.
but to me, I'm like, well, these things that I'm latching onto and that are so powerful to me, you're erasing them just so you can forward your friend. And I get it. That's what people push back on. You have to do that to get to the next movie. But the way that's not how movies work, like you said, that's how comics work.
Yeah.
And when I'm in the mindset of watching a movie, I need it to function like a movie. I can't have it function like a comic book because my brain is wanting and it's
Mhm.
disappointed because it's not giving me the roundedness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't, like I said, at the end of the day, the character stuff is what matters. And watching
Mhm.
Infinity War, watching Endgame, that brought that all back. Endgame even has one thing where Infinity War, you have the whole thing with Banner not being able to communicate with the Hulk.
Yep.
And it's his whole arc. He can't figure it out. And then in Infinity War, in Endgame, when he shows up, he's like, "Oh yeah, I figured that out off screen." It's like, what?
We'll just hand wave that away.
Like,
Don't worry about it.
yeah, I'm like, it. I get that these movies. When I say this, because George Lucas says this about Star Wars, when these movies are made for 12-year-olds, the 12-year-old in all of us, I don't mean that as a negative,
No.
because we need to have that kid-like joy, right?
Yeah.
But I don't need these movies to be written by 12-year-olds. I need them to follow through on these arcs that they're building. Don't take out Thor's eye and then just give him an eye back in the next one, because that's making me feel like, and that was one of the reasons I didn't want to watch Infinity War, because you see him with the eye and I was like, I can't be invested in these things if you're just going to retcon them. And so I don't know. And I get it, but people push back, and I understand. It's just my brain works a little different, I guess.
You're right. And that's the thing, right? Movies aren't comic books, but the MCU is the comic books of movies. And what's the one thing with comic books is like, it doesn't matter what you change. It ends up going back to what it was, right? Like they can kill off Steve Rogers in the comics, but eventually he's going to come back to life and become Captain America again, because that's what people want in the comic book is Steve Rogers as Captain America. They want, because otherwise
you also don't want to alienate the people that don't read comics religiously, and then they come back. Well, why is Dr. Octopus living in the mind of Peter Parker's body, right? They're going to be alienated by stuff like that. So you do want to bring again, Stan Lee's illusion of change. You pretend that these things matter, but then you walk it back because people are not used to. They can't have Dr. Octopus, the Sinister Spider-Man, as the new status quo. That's just not what Spider-Man is.
Yeah, and it's so hard to do in that medium, and so that's the really difficult part. You could do those stories in movies, but what you're going to do is you're going to limit the audience, and end of the day, that's the biggest thing they want is the broadest audience, the most butts and seats.
Right.
And unfortunately,
that's the kind of movie that it is.
But it is. That is the kind of movie it is. It just unfortunately it does sacrifice some types of storytelling in order to do that. Where I do think that it works, thankfully, is that they can back it up with character interactions. If you don't get the growth of the characters, it does become, because I mean, let's be real. If comic books mirrored real life, then Tony Stark would have probably died of old age in the, like 10 years ago, right? Because he'd be in his 90s right by now. Or older. So it's that kind of stuff. But you're right in that it can be tough. And so eventually you just have to get off the roller coaster. I mean, I still enjoy them, and I will keep watching the MCU movies as long as I get enjoyment out of them. But I also am like, I still haven't watched stuff like Loki season 2 or things like that. I don't feel as though I have to watch all of it day and date anymore, like I did, because it's sort of the same thing. It's like I hear good things about it, and I know I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch whatever it is, I'm going to end up enjoying it. It's odds are it takes a lot for me to not like something. My biggest issue is when things are boring. It's that's the cardinal sin of any movie. This is episode 242 of this podcast. So, and one episode I did two movies. So 243 movies I have watched for this particular show. And
that's awesome. Yeah.
Of those, I can count on one hand the number that I don't ever want to watch again.
Well, I have so little time that if I'm going to sit down and watch a movie, I'm going to find a way to enjoy the movie. Even something, I say this all the time to my wife, even something like The Tooth Fairy with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? I mean, it's not for me, but there's a scene where he's dealing with Billy Crystal, and Billy Crystal is so funny, and The Rock is so good at reacting, because half of comedy is reacting to what's happening, that I was like, well, I just got the enjoyment that I needed out of this kids movie that's not for me. That scene did it for me. And it's the same. I agree with you. If a movie, the cardinal sin is if it bores me or if my mind wanders, which I did with a couple movies this summer that I won't name because I don't want to get in more trouble. But like literally there was a movie this summer that was like a 4th or 5th movie. And I was like, I could literally be doing anything else right now. I don't need to be here for this. You know what I mean?
Mission Impossible. Did you not like Mission Impossible?
No, I loved Mission Impossible.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that. But this other movie was like, I don't I don't need this. Like, and I started doing, well, what am I going to do when I get home? Like, what are we going to make for dinner? That's a problem. If I'm not involved and I'm thinking
Yeah.
about what I'm going to do after your stupid movie is over, then it's like, you
Yep.
failed at something. You've lost me along the way. And again, even though I have issues, like I'm saying this again and again, even though I have issues with the MCU, there has not been a movie that I walked out of going, that was other, not even Captain Marvel, because it was enjoyable. It's just, there isn't a movie that I've hated. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There isn't a movie that I
Yep.
was like, this is one of the worst things I've ever, because they're all the same technically with their interactions. And if it has that in it, then great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't get mad at it. Like you said, I'm only got myself to blame if I sit and watch a movie that's, going to waste my time. It's like,
Sure.
that's why I have to be a little more choosy.
And that completely makes sense, and that's important. I think that a lot of people don't understand is like, I have the time because I don't have kids. I just have a dog, and I live
Uh-huh.
alone. So it's like I can make the time to watch a lot more movies. That's part of why I do too many podcasts. Is I have the time to do them. But it's like I have
Right.
that time, but you don't, or this person doesn't, or I have friends of mine that haven't seen a lot of stuff because they've got kids and they've got families and they've got stuff going on and they have other interests outside of watching movies too, which
Yeah.
all those things are completely valid. So I never decry somebody who's like, you know what, I just don't really care to go watch that one, or I'm going to skip that one this time. It's like, all right, that's cool. Eventually you might watch it or you may never. That's fine. And I think that is something that too many people don't do either, is they feel like fans, I mean, obviously being short for fanatic, but fans can really hurt something as much as they can help it, because you can get to be too exuberant
Yes.
about a thing, right? Like
Right.
it just, at some point you just have to let people do what they're going to do and not
Yeah.
try to force them into your fandom. Like, and you brought up, and I think it's a really good point, is that a lot of people that were into this kind of stuff, or into, like, I see it with tabletop games, Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that too, is
Uh-huh.
I grew up in that era where it was not cool to play D&D, and it wasn't a thing that a lot of people did. And so you were ostracized a little bit, you were made fun of. And I am now, like, I love the more inclusivity that it gets, and the more people play it, because it's such a fun experience, and I want other people to experience that I don't want to keep people from it. But I also know people who just have no desire for it, and I know that, and that's perfectly fine too. And all of that's great. Like, just let people do what they're
Mhm.
going to do. Like, don't force things. That's the
Well,
easiest way
that's
to turn people off to it.
yeah, there's a positive thing in these comic book movies becoming so big, is that, jocks know who Thanos is. Jocks know who, you know, Rocket the Raccoon is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like my parents were like, when my parents mentioned the name Thanos, so mentioning Black Panther, it's like, well, these things are normalized where they weren't before. Even
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons, or people that play that, it's like, well, it's not so much a thing to make fun of anymore, because we all have our things that we're kind of into that maybe other people aren't into, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I like about fandoms, is that, oh, now we're all welcoming. Where you go wrong is when you're like, oh, you don't like a comic book movie, how dare you? I'm
Right.
going to threaten your life. I'm going to say, I'm going to say, I'm going to kill you the next time I see you, or you should die, or stuff like that. It's like, well, that's like, or again, with these new Star Wars movies, especially, it feels
Mm.
like, and Batman v Superman, it's like, I cannot, it makes me feel like I don't have the right to like something, and I don't have the right to dislike something, because
Yeah.
fans are so possessive and entitled that any kind of, criticism or knock is seen as some kind of, attack on their or livelihoods, and attack on their humanity. And it's like, well, I get that, but there's no reason to make it personal. You don't have to. Don't listen to me if you don't like what I have to say about a certain thing. You don't have to listen to me, but you also don't have to threaten my life,
Right.
or make fun of my children. Or that hasn't happened yet, but there's, I'm sure it has somewhere. You know what I mean? Where people are afraid
Oh
for
yeah.
how to say what they feel. And if you feel like I'm knocking the MCU too much, it's like, well, that's just how my brain works. I'm still gonna like them, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But you don't have to listen to me. It's
Well,
that simple, and I think that's what people don't understand.
yeah, and one of the things I've always appreciated about our interactions on Twitter have always
Yeah,
been that you have a very reasonable approach to all of this that I don't think enough people do, because you don't make a fandom or your like or dislike of something into your personality. And I
yeah,
appreciate that, because that's where it can be tough, right? Is I'm an MCU stan, and that's not a personality. That's a part of what can be built into a personality, but that just being a fan of a thing doesn't define who you are,
yeah.
for good or ill.
Well,
And that,
yeah.
so I've
Well,
always,
thanks.
I just want to say I've always appreciated that. Is like, even when we disagree on something,
Yeah,
there's always like a reason for it. There's always a measurement to it, and it's always
mhm,
respectful. And I very
yeah.
much appreciate that, because that's the kind of thing I want
Right.
to
Well,
foster too. Like,
absolutely.
I
Well,
want.
it's I say these things about Thor getting his eye back, and again, I say this so much, and people, fight back on it, that I don't remember if you and I have ever had a conversation like that. But the reason that I don't remember that we've had a conversation like that is because I think you're a very reasonable person. You have your likes, your dislikes, but
Mhm.
and again, wow, I so appreciate that you're saying that, because that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to start arguments. I want to start conversations.
Yes.
I don't think that opinions need, if somebody's top 10 list, matches mine exactly, like each placement, that's going to make me want to kill myself. Because I don't, the homogeneity of life is not something that I want to be able to, oh, why do you have this as not on your list? Why is this number 5 instead of number 2? I want to be able to have those interactions instead of
Yeah.
just us patting each other on the back and giving each,
Hmm.
it gets boring after a while. That's not a conversation. It's more of a, just kind of a reveling in joy. And then what do you do after that? There's
Yeah.
no, I don't know. But yeah, I do appreciate that. I'm sorry if we've had those conversations before about comic book movies, but
No, I
I
mean,
feel like you're
honestly,
respectful enough that
yeah.
we haven't gotten in fights, and that's the difference, I think.
No, and that's the beauty of it. Is what I want is conversations. I don't need everybody to agree with me all the time. I don't care to go to the Mutual Admiration Society, right? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yes,
want
yes.
and even if I agree with somebody and I can talk about it and we can geek out about a thing, that's fun. But if we don't agree on something, or we have differing opinions on something, we can come together and we
Mhm.
can have that conversation. That's what I want. Like, I've sort of had a thing where on all forms of social media, I very rarely have blocked people, because
Mhm.
for the most part, it's gotten more common lately, because I'm just getting to the point where I stopped caring. But
Yeah.
it's almost always people that go way over the line. But like,
Mhm.
I want to have those conversations. I don't want to just drop a tweet of like, I'm gonna stir the pot and then walk away from it and let people
Right, yeah.
like yell and scream. I don't get that either. But like, I will put out an opinion. Right now, I've been doing the 30-day movie challenge. Just, every day put up a different movie that fits whatever their thing is.
Mhm.
And I do that not because I want to toot my own horn or anything like that. I want to generate some conversation. I've had people come back with like, "Yeah, that's cool," and then this is one that I liked. The soundtrack one
Oh,
was a
yeah.
great one. Like,
Yeah.
I want that. I want that going on, because that fosters all sorts of cool stuff. If I didn't do this show, there's so many movies I would never have seen, because they would have been out of sight, out of mind. Whereas people can be like, yeah, no, you got to check this movie out. And I'll be like, I haven't even heard of that before. Sure, let's watch it. Come on my show. We'll talk about it. And because of that,
Mhm.
I've seen things like Amelie, which was
Mhm.
fantastic. There's
Yes.
this Japanese film called Fish Story, amazing. Um,
Mm.
and like all sorts of stuff like that. Even going back and watching some classics, like finally watching The Apartment, um, which
Yeah.
is, I wouldn't have sought that movie out on my own necessarily, but somebody wanted to watch that with me, and I was like, "This is amazing! How did I go 40 years of my
Mhm.
life and never see this?" Like,
Where has this been?
so
Yeah.
yeah, where has it been my whole life? And so that's one of those things I want to foster, that kind of conversation as well. So I think that was
Right.
it's just something I just want to make sure you understood how much I appreciate that you do that,
Oh.
you put that out there. So thank you for that.
No. Well, right back at you. I mean, it's it's the Scorsese thing. It's like, yeah, enjoy what you enjoy, but you don't have to enjoy just that one particular thing. There's a whole world of other things out there. What I love about your podcast, you know, with Gore, with this one or anything, it's like you cover things from Nope to Chud to 12 Angry Men to The Fugitive to The
Yep.
Outsiders to Eraserhead to the Maltese Falcon. Like you've got the classics in there as well as like the lowbrow stuff. You have to, again, people push back on watch more movies, but yeah, watch more movies because there's so much out there that you're gonna love, and
Yeah.
you're gonna see that this comic book movie that you love has been built not just from other comic book movies but other movies from the 30s and the 40s, and
Oh yeah.
Spielbergisms have wended their way into these, and you're gonna go, oh, that's where the and I've had a conversation just recently with Jason of Binge Movies where he said, because I point these things out, and let's say I point something out on Top Gun Maverick, that doesn't mean you have to stop liking Top Gun Maverick.
Right.
In a way, because you can see where the pieces have come from, you're able to enjoy Top Gun Maverick even more. You know what I mean? It's everything is cyclical and everything is built, and so
Yeah.
it's not just Iron Man to Avengers Endgame building that. There's all these like film discourse and the way that visuals have been, cinematography is adapted to get where we are today,
Yeah.
and special effects. It's like you've got it's I'm not making fun of you. I'm just saying you've got so much to experience that it's just going to broaden your mind and be like, oh, I can see the scope of everything, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that's what you got, this idea of taking movies that people haven't seen, you know, like someone hasn't seen Citizen Kane is like, well, I guess I better get around to it. What better way to do it than talking with Travis? You know what I mean? It's like it's his whole show. And
Yeah.
so picking Endgame, when you told me like, well, do this and pick this and figure out if it's on the website, I was like, you know what? I think I've been kind of putting it off, but let's watch Avengers Endgame. Not just like, because again, I don't think of myself as a hoity-toity, only watching Ingmar Bergman movies type guy. Right? I want to be able to enjoy these superhero things just as much. And yeah, I mean, Endgame a tick off the box kind of movie, but I'm glad I saw it. There's there's no one but me to blame for not being there to cheer on Cap picking up Mjolnir. You know what I mean? But seeing those signatures at the end of the movie and just
Mhm.
going, even with all the flaws of this, they still did such a good job that I'm feeling emotions watching these signatures pop up on
Yeah.
screen, because you've given me 11 years, not always perfect entertainment, but you've given me 11 years of entertainment. That's nothing to sneeze at, you know what I mean? And it's the MCU, people have tried to do connected universes and it just isn't working because there's some kind of magic formula with the MCU that I don't think anybody else has been able to crack. And that's, yeah, it's wavering now because Endgame I think was maybe a saturation point, but
Yeah.
you know, there's, watch Endgame, watch Federico Fellini, you know, don't think of Scorsese as just knocking you. It's just, you've got to broaden your horizons. And again, that's what this show does. Travis, that's what you do. And that's something that I appreciate about what
Well, thank you.
your conversation. So
Thank you. I love that because I'm with you. Like, I love the fact that right now at my theater, I can go in and I can watch the Marvels or I can watch Killers of the Flower Moon. And both of
oh
those
yes,
things are there. And it's like, yes, obviously Killers of the Flower Moon is more of a investment, right? Because you got 3 hours plus. But it's there. And I love that. I want that to be there because I want to be able to then sit down and talk with people about it. And your point about like, the history of film and cyclical and all of that. And we see, I was listening to a show just recently. There's a great podcast called The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude. And it's father and son. And they do, they'll pick a movie, they'll watch it. And, you know, so it's Phil is roughly in his, I think, late 40s or early 50s. And Austin's in his early 20s. And so they have very different mindsets, and obviously grew up with different stuff. And it's great because they pick movies from all sorts of eras, and it's really interesting to hear the perspectives of that. Like listening to a 20 something talk about watching a movie from the 70s and loving the look and feel of what a 70s movie was, like something like Jaws,
yes,
right? Because
mm-hmm.
when you watch Jaws, it is very much a product of its time, and it's such a different style of filmmaking from what we get now. And
Yeah.
I love all that kind of stuff because that's the beauty of film is its history all the time. Even if it's, you know, it's manufactured history, sure, but it's still there's things about watching The Apartment versus watching or 12 Angry Men is a great example of when I watched 12 Angry Men for the first time, I could not get over how good that was. And
Yeah.
like it's still
Yes.
I'm still chewing on that and it's still rolling around in my head daily.
Mhm.
But there was a remake of it in the 90s, and part of why that didn't work as well when I watched it, because I decided I'm like, you know what, I'm going to watch this. It's only like an hour and a half. There was
Mhm.
just something in the different styles of the eras and how they made it, and
Yeah.
I love comparing and contrasting stuff like that. It's what makes film and entertainment so interesting to me. It's writing, because there's so many aspects of it. So it's a lot of fun, and it's so much fun doing this and getting to talk to people about it and having these discourses and being able to bring on people like you who don't always have to have the same opinions as I do. And I do like your
Yeah.
comparisons, by the way. I do like when you do stuff like that. And that is, I
Mhm.
think, the biggest thing is I can say something that is either saying like, look, this, this took from, this was inspired by, or this ripped off or whatever. It doesn't take away from something like Top Gun Maverick is a good
Mhm.
example. Or I mean, anything really. There's so much like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. I went and saw that. I
Right.
had a blast with that movie. It owes so much to Into the Spider-Verse.
Yep. Yes, it does.
It's ridiculous, but it still
Mhm.
can stand on its own, and it's still super great. So making that comparison, you don't take away from something just because you're comparing it to something else.
Well,
And I
the
think,
thing, sorry, we might be on kind of a tangent here, but the thing that Mutant Mayhem does is, yeah, it owes itself to Spider-Verse, but it's also its own thing because
yep,
it's not. Spider-Verse was the reason that I think I have Into the Spider-Verse as my favorite comic book movie of all time is that it, number one, it really hit the Spider-Man stuff just perfect. It really hit the
oh yeah,
the POC perspective versus the female perspective. It had that whole wrapped into one movie, and it also looked like a comic book. The characters move like, they
yeah,
can't move like that in live action, right?
hmm
You can only approximate it, but like, and so that has its own identity. But Mutant Mayhem had the identity of, this is what it looks like to look at a 16-year-old that's sketching in his sketchbook at school,
yes,
right? It has
hmm
that kind of unfinished quality. So even though it owes to Spider-Verse, it's still very much its own thing and has its own distinct style. And
yeah,
so you have to watch, again, I say you have to, I just really think it's more enriching if you can watch it this way. Watch it in a way that, oh, this compares to this, but it's also separate. Or maybe I don't, like comic book movies. I don't have to watch comic book movies. I've got these
yeah,
other things. It's like, but every now and then there are good comic book movies out there. You've got the Christopher Nolans, you've got the James Gunn stuff, you've got,
hmm
Tim Burton's made some great ones. You know what I mean? Sam Raimi. There's great quality stuff in all genres. I don't understand personally closing yourself off from that. And so that's, again, bringing it back to Scorsese, it's like, that's what we're talking about. Just go watch Killers of the Flower Moon. Go watch The Holdovers. Also go watch the Marvels. It's like, it's great having that
hmm
variety at the tip of your, in your wallet. You can just go and just pay for whatever. I think that's great.
yeah, absolutely. And we are in an era of just, I mean, we're lousy with choices for things to
Yes.
watch. So whether you want to go back and watch something you've seen before, or you want to check out something new, or you want to take a flyer on, maybe not in the theater, although subscriptions at theaters have made that a little bit easier. Like there's some movies in the last couple of years I've gone to watch in a theater that I might not have otherwise because I have something like AMC Stubs where I can
Yeah.
pay $20 a month and go. But again, also being single, living alone, it's a little easier for me to do that. But even if you just wait the 6 months or whatever for something to show up on streaming services somewhere, like The Holdovers is a perfect example. Because Alexander Payne, I mean, amazing movies, and I
Yeah.
can't wait to
Mhm.
watch The Holdovers. Unfortunately, it's not playing at my theater, and I'm kind of mad about that. But
Yeah.
like,
Same here. I know where you
it's
are.
it's that having those choices and equating something like the MCU to fast food doesn't make it a bad thing. It's not a knock on it. There's nothing wrong with Burger King or McDonald's.
Mm.
Just don't make it all that you eat. Don't make it the only thing. You
It's
can,
not healthy.
yeah, to
Yeah.
add that
It's not the
variety.
healthiest diet.
And
Yeah, exactly.
and only watching Marvel content isn't healthy for you either, because you're never going to grow beyond that.
Mhm.
You know, or I mean, look, if that's the thing you want to do, that's your choice. Go ahead.
Mhm.
I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but I'm going to suggest try some new things. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and you know,
perfect.
Endgame. I'm glad that you got to watch Endgame and got to see that, and you know, now you can A, tick the box off, but B, sort of put a bow on that. And even if you don't watch any more MCU stuff, you got through that big phase, that big whatever it
Mhm.
was. And if something comes along that tickles your fancy and makes you say, oh man, I should go check that out, you can. um
Mhm.
but Endgame, I just think, was such a satisfying conclusion for so many stories of these characters that brought it about. And it did give us a good finality to a few of them, not all of them, but a couple of them.
Mhm.
And
Well, that's the thing is that the finality that that's the thing that I loved about Guardians 3 this summer was that there was such
mhm,
a sense of closure to everything, and you can see how awesome is it? I'm just going to pick one character. How awesome is it that Nebula is a character that's been tortured and pieced together from other pieces of other things, and her arc concludes with building worlds and bringing people together. Like
yep,
that's her arc, and it's like, wow, you've it's not just, you know, circles and circles and, you know, wheels and wheels, and you've gotten us to a place where now they can move on and do something else. There was so much closure and finality to that movie that
yeah,
it's just, it was happy, but it was heartbreaking. So it was bittersweet. So you knew
mhm,
that this is the last time you're going to see these characters, but it's like, yeah, but they're going out in such a way. And again, that's a big reason why The Dark Knight Rises means a lot to me, because as my favorite comic book character, seeing Bruce Wayne get closure,
yeah,
how brave is that for a comic book movie to end in that way? That
yeah,
these characters are happy and they've accomplished what they need to do, and it's like, and Endgame, like I said, it's that finality of Cap ending up with Peggy at the end. It's like, yes, that's what you want, and you
mhm,
want to. I think that's the difference. Like it ends in a big CGI battle that kind of looks like a Spy Kids movie sometimes with the way they're melding everybody. But the end of the movie is not that. The end of the movie is Steve and Peggy finally having that dance and
yep,
finally and that's the image you go out on. It's like, you know, I have qualms with the movie, but at the end of the day, excellent work. You've really closed it out in a way that's like, yes, there's a payoff to this that I'm glad
mhm,
I was here for, even though I didn't watch these things in theaters. I was still there for the experience, seeing it from the beginning to the end. And that's, yeah, that's one thing I was grateful for. This is like, you know, I'm finally going to watch Endgame. I've got no excuse. I've got an excuse to have no excuse. Let's go ahead and watch this. So yeah, and I think this is a great, what you and I have talked, to me anyway, I feel like this is a great conversation about what this kind of stuff means and how we can, even with perceived flaws, we can still see the good and what's accomplished in this thing.
yeah,
And again, we don't have to like it. People can hate what we said or what I've said, but move on.
yeah,
Go watch
exactly.
something else. It's like there's all this stuff. I don't want to say content, but there's all this, you know, information and joy and art that we can absorb. And I think,
Yeah,
you know, I really like that we were able to gear the conversation in that way.
I do too. I do too. Um, so let people know where they can find you online and what you're working on. Because I mentioned at the top of the show, the Nostalgiacast. What's that? Where can people find it?
Well, Nostalgiacast is my co-host and I, Johnny. We started this thing as, let's take movies that we loved as kids, but that we haven't seen in say 10 years. And you're walking past the Walmart $5 or $3.50 bin, and you're like, oh my gosh, here's the Jazz Singer with Neil Diamond. I haven't seen this in forever. It's $3. Sure, it's the price of. I'll just buy this. And so you sit down and watch it, and your reaction to the movie is either, yeah, this is just as good as I remember, or it's, what the hell was I thinking? You know, that kind of thing. Like, obviously I've grown from here. So that's kind of where the show started. And we started watching all these movies from like the 80s or the 70s. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to, at the end of the day, it's like, well, that was fine. But
Mhm.
in our recent seasons, we've started doing, which I pushed against because I didn't want to do stuff like Star Wars or Princess Bride or Back to the Future, because everybody talks about those things. But being able to talk about Back to the Future and the Princess Bride has been so much fun. That can still be nostalgic. And so
Yep.
that's what we're all about. It's kind of like taking the, you know, is it helping? Nostalgia can be a dangerous thing, obviously, but like sometimes, you know, if we take off the rose colored glasses, are these movies still what they're meant to be?
Yeah.
And so we've been having fun with that. Last season we did 90s movies, which is what Johnny and I grew up on. So if you haven't checked out any of those episodes, like Goodfellas or The Matrix or Pulp Fiction or From Dusk Till Dawn or That Thing You Do, there's a whole bunch of movies that we just delved into and had so much fun talking about. Our next season that we're starting at the end of this month, we're going to dive into 70s films. So talking about Jaws and stuff like that.
Nice.
We're going to be looking at kind of the same thing that happened. I think we're at a saturation point right now where people are kind of tiring of the same old comic book movies and generic run-of-the-mill cookie cutter stuff. That happened in the 50s and 60s to the point where Coppola and Spielberg and De Palma and Scorsese, John Milius started coming out of the woodwork, and studios were like, you know what? Let's get away from the big budget anonymous stuff and hand these films over to these people that have actual voices. I think that's kind of where we're gearing towards right now. We're waiting for the next big thing to come around, or maybe reinvigorate us. And so talking about the 70s, it's so far the conversations we've had have been so much fun because it's exciting watching movies that birthed a whole new generation of film fans. Awesome. So yeah, absolutely check us out. And I'm only on Twitter right now. We're on the Blue Sky thing or whatever. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but yeah, Twitter, you can find me just at DW Lundberg. I'll be there because I've made so many friends like you, Travis. Yeah, I'll be there until my friends all disappear because it's those conversations that I live for. And yeah, thank you for being one of those people that I can have these healthy conversations with.
Absolutely. And yeah, definitely a great follow on Twitter. Blue Sky as well. If you're on there, look for him there. But this has been amazing, Darin, and you definitely will. I'll have you back anytime. We'll find another movie. Awesome. Maybe we'll find something I haven't seen that you love, and we'll talk about that. Who knows? There's all sorts of stuff. Now I'm on all the socials as TV's Travis. So anybody that's listening to this that isn't already following me, come on out, follow me, and let's talk. Let's have these conversations because it's a lot of fun, and let's make them more positive spaces too. Because that's what I want. I want good conversation. And if you enjoy this show and you want to watch it recorded live, I do that on Sunday nights at Twitch, twitch.tv/TV's Travis, typically around 8:00 Eastern time, varies week to week, depending. And then the show comes out. This show comes out on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube in a video form. So a subscription on YouTube would be great. It does help my channel grow a little bit. So I appreciate that. You can also go to my website, tvstravis.com, where you can find links to all of the shows that I do, not just this one. I'm on a show called Gore, talking about all horror movies. You're going to want to listen to the next episode that comes out of that in a couple of weeks because I had thoughts on the movie we watched. We all did. I won't give away what the movie was, but trust me, it'll be worth listening to. And you can also find links to like, silly merchandise with my logo on it, or the patreon.com/WYHS for as little as $1 an episode. So that's where you can find me around there. Check out the Nostalgiacast. Absolutely. And Darin, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being on. We'll do this again.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Until next week. And I am watching, Identity. Which is a movie with John Cusack. I cannot wait. John Bush is coming on to talk with me about it, and he's never seen it before. I can't wait. This is going to be super, super fun because I dig this movie. So come on back for that.
That's a great one,
yeah. So until next week, and just remember to enjoy your movies, and the world's tough, so be excellent to each other.
Somebody peed my pants.
Oh, thank God.
But I don't know if it was baby me or old me. Or just me.
Time travel!